Mino stands by the window of his office, looking out over the city. The sun is setting, painting the sky orange and purple. Usually, this view calms him. Up here, at the very top, everything seems clear. Every building, every street below is part of his world. A world he built himself. A world where everything has a rule, a cause and effect. Everything is clear and precise. His decisions are law. His word is final. Here, he controls everything. But today, the view from the window brings no peace. He looks, but doesn't see. His thoughts are far away. They are there, in his huge, quiet apartment, in the room with the pink wallpaper and drawings on the walls. A crack has appeared in his world, small, almost invisible, but he feels it. This feeling of disarray, a glitch in the well-oiled system. He can't put a name to it. He just knows that something is wrong, not as it should be. He places his palms on the cool glass, trying to regain his usual firmness. But inside, only a quiet, growing anxiety remains. He turns away from the window. His office, spacious and austere, suddenly seems empty. The shiny desk, the expensive clock, the perfectly ordered shelves, none of it means anything now. He picks up a simple pen from the stand and twirls it in his fingers. Usually, he makes important decisions here. Now, the most important decision is being made by someone else, and Minho can't do anything about it. For the first time in many years, he feels like he is not at the helm, but simply a passenger being carried in an unknown direction. At home, in a room that smells of baby cream and medicine, lies his daughter, Karen. She's 7 years old. Usually, her bed is a spaceship or a fortress. Now, it's just a hospital bed. She hasn't left it for 3 days. Her favorite stuffed bunny, which she never lets go of, lies next to her, forgotten. Karen's cheeks, usually pink and firm, are now pale. Her lips are dry. She's asleep, but her sleep is restless. She shudders, muttering something inaudible. Minho places his palm on her forehead. Her skin is burning. It's that fever that won't go down. They've tried everything the doctors recommended. Syrups, pills, cold compresses. The fever goes away for a couple of hours, then returns with renewed vigor, as if some strange, uncontrollable fire is blazing inside the girl. Minho sits on the edge of the bed and looks at her face. He remembers every smile, every laugh. He remembers how she ran to him with open arms when he came home. Now she doesn't run. She doesn't even really open her eyes. When she wakes, her gaze is cloudy, unseeing. She just groans softly and closes her eyes again. It tears his heart apart. He is a man used to solving problems, finding the right person, giving the right order, paying the right amount. But here, in the face of this silent illness, all his levers of power are useless. He can buy an entire clinic, but he can't buy health for his child. This feeling of helplessness is new to him. It is bitter and unpleasant. He takes her small hot hand in his. Her fingers weakly squeeze in response. This small movement is the only thing holding him together now. Naomi doesn't leave her daughter's side. She sits in a chair right next to the bed. Her posture is tense, as if she's ready to jump up at any second. Her face is marked by fatigue, dark circles under her eyes, slightly sunken cheeks, but there's no waning spirit in her eyes. A determination burns there, a determination to stand this post, to stay vigilant, to stay awake until her little girl gets better. She adjusts the blanket over Harin, even though it's already lying flat. She adjusts the pillow. Every 15 minutes, she gently presses her lips to her daughter's forehead, checking for fever. Her movements are precise, almost mechanical. It's a ritual that gives her the illusion of control. Minho watches her from the doorway. He sees her biting her bottom lip, something she never does. He sees her gaze flicker over Harin's sleeping face, then out the window, into the darkness, but sees nothing there. He sees fear in her eyes, deep, all-consuming fear, and Minho thinks he understands this fear. Of course, it's fear for their child. The fear of a mother who might lose what's most precious to her. His own fear mirrors hers. He comes over and puts his hand on her shoulder. Naomi flinches, as if she's been woken. She looks at him, and for a second, something else flickers in her eyes, something quick and elusive. Not just fear, but almost panic. But she immediately looks down, closing her long eyelashes. "Everything will be okay," Minho says quietly. He says it more for himself than for her. Naomi only nods, her head down. Her hand tightens around her daughter's. Minho thinks her silence and this strange detachment are simply the result of fatigue and worry. He can't even imagine that the fear in her eyes has two layers. One, for their daughter's life, and the other, deeper and darker, for the life of the lie that has slept quietly in their house for 7 years and is now ready to awaken to the scream of illness. The clinic resembles a luxury hotel, but without the smiles. Everything gleams, the floors, the walls, the equipment. The air smells not of a hospital, but of expensive lemon-scented hand sanitizer, but that doesn't change the essence of the situation. Minho sits in the head doctor's office, and he spreads his hands. It's not a gesture of helplessness, but one of professional caution. Naomi sits next to him. She looks at her lap, clutching a paper cup of iced tea between her palms. "We've run all the standard tests, Mr. Minho," says the doctor, a young man in a perfectly fitting lab coat. "We've ruled out obvious causes, infections, inflammations. The fever is so persistent, without any other obvious symptoms. This requires a more in-depth investigation." Minho nods. He's not a doctor, he's a man of action. His language is orders, contracts, decisions. He speaks a foreign language here, and it angers him, but he listens. The doctor talks about possible rare syndromes, hidden autoimmune processes, complex genetic tests. Every word is a new, unfamiliar enemy. Minho doesn't understand all the terms, but he understands the essence. They're at a dead end, and to find a way out, they need to dig deeper, into the very essence, into the very cell. What needs to be done? His voice is even, unwavering. It's the tone he usually uses to conclude difficult negotiations. The doctor lists extensive blood tests, specific genetic panels, tests whose samples will have to be sent to a lab in the capital. It's time-consuming. It's expensive. It's not a guarantee. "Do everything," Minho says, cutting off further explanation. He doesn't look at the bill. He looks to the future, where his daughter is laughing again and running through the park. Any price between that future and now is just a number. Whatever it takes, the best, the fastest. "I'm ready for anything." Naomi finally looks up at him. There's not gratitude in her gaze, but something akin to horror. But Minho gets it wrong again. He thinks she's frightened by the scale of the disaster the doctors are describing. He places his hand over her cold fingers, clutching the cup. "Everything will be okay," he repeats his mantra. His hand is warm and heavy. Hers doesn't move beneath him. He steps out into the silent hallway and takes out his phone. With one click, he dials a number he knows better than his own. Jinho picks up on the first ring. "No hello, just a quiet wait on the other end." "Jinho, Sunmyeon Clinic. We need specialists in pediatric immunology and genetics. The best, in the country, and if necessary, abroad. Organize their work here. Today, create all the conditions for them. Money is no object." There was a moment of silence on the other end, then a smooth, unwavering voice. "Got it. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Or did he say yes? Minho can't remember. Jinho always answers the same way. He doesn't ask unnecessary questions. He doesn't elaborate. He takes a task and disappears, only to reappear a short time later with the result. It's always been like this. 20 years. Ever since he and Minho were just two hungry guys sharing a bowl of noodles. Jinho was always there, behind and slightly to the left, quiet, incredibly efficient. A shadow that Minho couldn't exist without. Unthinkable. When Jinho appears in the hall, he no longer looks like the guy from before. He's wearing a formal dark suit, his face an impenetrable mask. He brings with him not noise, but calm, the calm of a well-oiled machine. He nods to Minho, walks up to the receptionist, and says a few quiet words. No one asks him to repeat himself. A special life begins to swirl around him. More people arrive with suitcases of equipment, and doctors begin to bustle about with a new, respectful attention. Minho watches this, leaning against the wall. He sees Jinho catch his eye and tilt his head ever so slightly. Everything is under control. This gesture should be reassuring, and it is. But today, looking at that familiar, devoted back, Minho feels a strange emptiness. He trusts Jinho more than anyone. He would trust him with his life. He's already trusted him with his daughter's life. That should be the limit of trust. Why then does this cold, inexplicable stone remain inside him? The procedure room. Everything is too white and too bright. Karen sits on a high table, pressed against Naomi. The girl looks at the nurse with wide, terrified eyes. She was already crying when they started the IV. Now she needs to draw a lot of blood from a vein for those very complex tests. "I won't, Mom. I won't. Please," she whispers, burying her face in her mother's robe. Naomi strokes her hair, muttering something, but her voice trembles. Minho approaches from the other side. "Harina," he says softly. "Look at me." The girl slowly lifts her tear-stained face from her mother. "Remember how you were afraid of the big water park, and then you liked this one the most? It's just a second, faster than sliding down a slide." "This is going to hurt," she sobs. "I'll hold your hand, really, really tight, and you squeeze mine as hard as you want. If it hurts, squeeze harder. Deal?" He holds out his hand to her. Large, with clear lines, a hand that has held many things, but never with such tenderness and such fear. Heron looks at his hand, then at his face. She nods, barely noticeably. She places her small, warm hand in his. Her fingers are like twigs. Minho wraps his palm around them completely, creating a warm, protective cocoon. The nurse deftly applies a tourniquet, finding a bluish vein on the thin, pale hand. Corinne closes her eyes and, with a strength unbelievable for such a fragile girl, digs her nails into her father's palm. A sharp, tiny prick. The girl sobs, but doesn't scream. Her face contorts into a grimace. Tears stream down her cheeks, but she holds on. She holds on because her father is holding her hand. Minho watches as crimson blood fills vial after vial. Every drop is a piece of his girl, a piece of her life, taken from her by this disease. Every vial is hope, sealed in glass. His heart tightens. It's a physical sensation, a heavy, cold knot beneath his ribs. He's ready to give all his blood, all his strength, if only these vials would be magical and provide an answer. He looks at Heron's face, distorted with suffering, and the lump in his chest becomes so hard and painful that he feels like he's going to suffocate. He only squeezes her small fingers tighter in his firm, reliable hand. It's all he can do. Just be here and hold. The hallway is long and white, with a soft, soundless surface underfoot. Naomi can't sit still in one of the impersonal plastic chairs lined up along the wall. She moves. She takes short steps from one door to the other, turns and walks back. Her fingers fiddle with the hem of her cardigan, alternately clutching and releasing a crumpled tissue in her hand. Minho's gaze on her. He's leaning against the wall by the window, at the end of the hallway, his figure a hard, dark silhouette against the daylight. He watches her, and under his gaze, her skin feels like it's on fire. She knows she should go to him. Say something encouraging, put her hand on his shoulder, like she does in times of stress, but her legs won't move. Her body refuses to move toward him. Instead, she turns again and takes a few steps in the other direction. And there, in the shadows by the exit to the stairs, stands Jinho. He doesn't move. He doesn't look at her directly. His gaze is fixed somewhere in front of him, but she feels that he is aware of her every step, her every movement. His presence here, in this hospital corridor, seems unbearable to her. It physically presses on her chest. He embodies all that quiet, terrible truth that is about to cease being just a ghost in the corner of their lives. She avoids looking him in the eye. If she did, she'd probably scream, or cry, or fall. She only sees his hands folded in front of him, his motionless shoulders. Something else comes to mind, how those hands touched her, how his shoulders looked, not in a formal suit, but under in another world, many years ago. The memory makes her sick. She freezes in the middle of the hallway, as if cornered. On one side is her husband, who believes he's fighting for their daughter. On the other, a man who knows the truth and remains silent, and she's between them, torn apart, unable to move a single step in either direction. She closes her eyes and takes a deep, trembling breath, as if trying to get enough air before diving into icy water. But she can't jump. She simply stands, a small island of agony, in the sterile white sea of the hospital corridor. The week drags on like thick, black tar. Time loses its meaning. There are only day and night, but even they blend. Minho barely sleeps. He lies on the couch in his office, or sits in the living room of their house, which seems empty and echoing without Heron's laughter. Sleep comes in fits and starts, short and uneasily, and he wakes with a name on his lips. He finds an old photo album, the same one, paper, with thick pages. Naomi loved to print them out, saying there was something real about them. He flips through the pages. There she is, Naomi, her eyes shining, holding a tiny bundle in a lace blanket. Karen's face is the size of his palm. He remembers that day, the fatigue bordering on euphoria, and that all-consuming fear that he is so big and clumsy, and she is so fragile. Here's a photo in a meadow. Karen is about 3 years old. She's running away from him, looking back and laughing heartily. He's in the photo, his face, which he almost doesn't recognize now, relaxed, open, with laughter crinkled in around his eyes. He catches her just as she's about to crash into his arms, and Naomi stands a little distance away, filming them on her phone, smiling her calm, warm smile. He peers at these photographs, looking for, what, a clue? A sign? He studies Karen's features. Her eyes are his cut, but their color, the shape of her eyebrows, her smile, he doesn't know. He simply sees his daughter, the one whose first step he captured on video, whose nursery rhymes he knows by heart, whose laughter was the best reward for him after a hard day. Naomi brings him tea and places the mug next to him on the table. Her movements are quiet, ghostly. She doesn't sit down to look at the album with him. She stands and watches him from a distance, and then her gaze falls on the open page too, the one with the meadow. Her face freezes. No tenderness, no nostalgia. Only a stony, impenetrable mask, beneath which He's sure, rages the same fear as his. He wants to say, "Look how happy we were," but the words don't come. He simply closes the album with his palm. The happy past weighs on him with a weight he can't explain. Jinho periodically sends short messages. "All labs are operational. We are waiting." These dry, businesslike lines are the only thread connecting him to hope and to that world of order where he still has some control. Finally, a call. Not a message, not an email, a call to his personal number. Minho looks at the phone screen, where the clinic's name lights up. His heart gives a single, loud, heavy thump somewhere in his throat. He picks up. The receptionist's voice is polite, respectful, but there's a strange professional caution in it. "Mr. Minho, the test results are ready. Dr. Kang would like you to come over for a discussion." Along with Ms. Naomi, Minho sits in the silence of his office. A ray of sunlight falls on his desk, dust motes dancing in the light. "Any preliminary results?" he asks, his own voice sounding foreign to him. There was a slight pause on the other end of the line. Dr. Khan insists on a personal meeting with both parents to discuss all aspects. He asked me to convey that this is very important. The word parents sounds special in this sentence, with a certain emphasis. Minho feels a chill run down his spine. This doesn't sound like good news. Good news can be given over the phone. Complex tests require an in-person meeting. Very important to meet with both. A thought flashes through his mind. Exhausted by a week of sleeplessness, they've found something rare, something hereditary. They need to know both families' medical histories. Yes, that must be it. "Okay," he says. "We'll be there in an hour." He hangs up and sits for a few seconds, staring into space. Then he calls Naomi. She picks up almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. "The results are ready," he says without preamble. "We need to go. Together." The doctor is waiting. Silence on the other end, so long that he thinks the connection has been lost. Then a quiet, toneless voice. "Okay, I'll be ready." And the call ends. He orders a car. While he waits, he runs through all the possible diagnoses in his head for the 1,000th time. Rare syndromes, genetic defects. He's ready for anything. He's ready to fight any disease. There's still room for this enemy in his clear, lucid world. The enemy will have a name, and against that name, a weapon can be found. He takes a deep breath, steeling himself. The hour before the meeting feels like an eternity, and at the same time, the only moment of peace before a battle whose outcome he can't even yet imagine. Dr. Khan's office is simple and bright. There are no unnecessary clutter. There's a large, light wood desk, a couple of chairs, a bookcase with neatly arranged folders, and a computer. On the desk sits a model of human DNA, an intricate spiral of plastic and wire. A large window floods the room with mercilessly bright daylight, making dust appear golden and every shadow sharp and distinct. Minho enters first. He chooses a chair directly across from the doctor. It's a familiar position, face to face with the person making the important decision. He sits up straight, resting his hands on his knees. His posture suggests composure, a readiness to listen and act. Naomi follows him in. Her gaze darts around the room, as if searching for an escape route, but there isn't one. She sits down next to Minho in the second chair. There's less than a meter between them, but there's a solid, invisible wall. She doesn't look at her husband. She doesn't adjust her dress. She simply sits, her hands on her purse in her lap, and gazes out the window, where carefree white clouds float. Her profile in the harsh light seems carved from marble, beautiful and utterly impenetrable. Kang, a middle-aged man with intelligent, tired eyes behind his glasses, offers him water. Minho declines with a nod. Naomi silently shakes her head. The silence in the room becomes resonant, broken only by the soft hum of the computer's system unit. Minho feels the fabric of his pants become slightly damp beneath his palms, resting on his knees. He takes a slow, deep breath, unnoticed by anyone else. He's ready. Dr. Kang begins speaking. His voice is calm, professional. He describes the research process, the complexity of the genetic analysis, and the specific panels they tested. He uses jargon, and Minho doesn't understand it all, but he gets the gist. They were looking for breakdowns, rare mutations, invisible glitches in the very code of Heron's life. Minho listens without moving. He hangs on every word, constructing a logical chain from them. His mind, honed by years of decision-making, tries to analyze, isolate the main points, predict the next step. From time to time, he nods, showing that he's following the thought. Beside him, Naomi is motionless, like a statue. She also looks at the doctor, but her gaze is glassy, empty, as if she's hearing speech through thick glass, and the words reach her distorted, devoid of meaning. Kang explains at length about how some preliminary indicators raise questions, about the need to rule out some options to confirm others. His speech is a carefully constructed bridge to something very important. He builds to the climax gradually, avoiding sharp edges, softening his wording. Finally, he pauses. His gaze glides from Minho to Naomi and back again. He pushes the keyboard aside and picks up a thin but heavy folder containing the results from the edge of the desk. The name Heron is printed in large letters on the cover. He holds the folder in his hands, unopened. His face, which had previously expressed focused, professional involvement, changes. It becomes serious in a different way. The scientist's detachment disappears. A human caution appears. Even pity. This is the expression people have when they have to communicate something that will change everything. He looks at them over his glasses, and in his eyes now is not data, but sympathy, mingled with the weight of responsibility. He places the folder on the table in front of him, precisely centered, and adjusts his glasses. Silence fills the room again, but now it's thick and viscous. Kang folds his fingers in front of him. He looks first at Minho, then longer at Naomi, as if checking to see if she's there. If she can hear. Mr. Minho, Ms. Naomi, he begins, his voice even quieter, but each word seems deliberate. Before we discuss the specific medical aspects of Heron's condition, I need to clarify one crucial formal point. For an accurate interpretation of the genetic test data, he pauses again, giving them time to prepare. Minho leans forward slightly, his brows furrowed slightly. He's expecting a question about hereditary diseases in the family. Something like that. Dr. Khan takes a deep breath. Are you both the girl's biological parents? He says clearly, without a hint of anything other than professional necessity. The question hangs in the air. Simple, direct, absolutely clear. For Minho, time stands still for a second. The sound of the computer humming, the sunbeam on the desk, the specks of dust in the air, everything freezes. His brain refuses to process the question. He hears the words, but their meaning doesn't sink in. It's some kind of absurd technical formality, a mistake in the wording. Of course they are her biological parents. He is her father. Naomi is her mother. It's an axiom, the foundation of his world for the past 7 years. He slowly turns his head toward Naomi, expecting to see the same puzzled, almost indignant reaction on her face. A quick, easy, what kind of strange question is that? But that's not what he sees. He sees all the residual tension drain from her face, leaving only emptiness and the icy, bottomless calm of doom. She doesn't look at the doctor. She doesn't look at him. Her gaze is fixed on that folder on the desk, on her daughter's name printed on the cover. She doesn't move. She doesn't breathe. She simply freezes. And in this mute, absolute reaction, in this absence of any movement, not even a blink, lies the answer. An answer that hits Minho in the chest with the force of a physical blow. Before his mind can fully comprehend the question, Minho frowns, slowly, as if the muscles in his face are resisting. It's a defensive reaction to the sheer nonsense. His forehead furrows slightly. He looks at Dr. Kong not with anger, but with poorly concealed irritation, as if he were a subordinate, asking an obvious and stupid question that's wasting his time. Of course, he says. His voice sounds a little sharper than he intended. He hears the irritation in it and pauses to compose himself. He exhales. I'm her father. What's wrong? He says it as a statement of fact, as if it were beyond dispute. I am her father. These words are fundamental to him. He is not biological, not legal. He is simply a father. He says them with the same certainty with which he would state his name. His gaze darts from the doctor to Naomi, expecting her to confirm it, to support it, to say something like, yes, doctor, what a strange question. But Naomi continues to stare into space. Her silence now seems not just tense, but loud. It begins to fill the room, displacing the air. His irritation mingles with growing anxiety. Why is the doctor asking this? What is it about these tests that requires clarification? His mind, still struggling with its usual logic, frantically searches for a rational explanation. Perhaps a paperwork error? A mix-up with the test tubes? Yes, definitely. Such things happen in hospitals. He's almost ready to demand a recheck, seeing it as nothing more than an annoying administrative error that Jinho will quickly correct. He expects Dr. Kang to apologize, to say something like, sorry for the formality, we just want to rule out any inaccuracies, and finally open the folder to discuss the real issue, the illness. But Dr. Khan doesn't apologize. He doesn't adjust his glasses. He doesn't open the folder. He simply shakes his head slowly, with genuine, heavy sadness. It's a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it contains a whole world of regret and inevitability. According to the results of the genetic tests, he says, and now every word drops like a stone. You, Mr. Minho, cannot be the child's biological father. There is no DNA match. He says it without embellishment, directly. A professional verdict, molecular truth, written in nucleotide sequences. It's not an opinion. It's a fact, as irrefutable as the law of gravity. Minho hears the words, but they don't form a coherent picture. Can't be the father. No DNA match. It's an abstraction. White noise. His gaze is glued to the folder on the desk. There, within those papers, in the columns of numbers and graphs, lies the verdict that was just announced. He watches as Dr. Kang finally opens the folder, turns a few pages, and pulls out a sheet with the official lab seal. He places it in front of Minho, turning it slightly so he can see. On the sheet is the name Heron, the name Minho, and the bold, clear lines of the conclusion, where the percentage of match is written in black and white. The number 0. Next to it is some complex chromosome diagram, where the lines do not converge. Proof. Minho doesn't read. He simply sees this paper, sees its physical reality. This isn't a dream. This is a document. And in that moment, the rational search for error, the hope for confusion, collapses like a house of cards. In their place, there is emptiness. Absolute, all-consuming emptiness. The room becomes very quiet, quieter than it has been before. Even the hum of the computer disappears. The sound of his own breathing is erased. Minho doesn't understand the words. He can no longer hear the doctor. All he hears is a ringing in his ears, a high, piercing, growing ringing, as if a crystal glass has shattered inside his skull. This ringing fills everything. It drowns out the world. His vision changes too. The bright light from the window becomes a blurry, blinding spot. Dr. Khan, his folder, his desk, everything blurs, losing its clear boundaries. The only thing that remains in focus is the results sheet. He sees it with an unnatural, frightening clarity. Every letter, every line of the stamp. He feels a coldness spreading from the center of his chest in all directions. Not an emotional cold, but a physical one, as if ice had been injected into his veins. His palms become clammy and icy. His legs, frozen under the table, go numb. He tries to move. Anything. But his body won't obey. It's paralyzed by this simple, monstrous information. His mind, that well-oiled instrument that always analyzed, decided, acted, is now simply overloaded. His thoughts don't run. They're frozen. There's only a white noise in his ears and an icy wave paralyzing him from within. He can't even turn to face Naomi. He can't move his head. He's frozen, staring at that damned piece of paper, while his inner universe, built on 7 years of fatherhood, love, and confidence, silently explodes and turns to dust, which now settles somewhere deep inside, in the very emptiness that now gapes where his heart should be. The ringing in his ears begins to recede, replaced by a deafening silence. Slowly, as if against his will, his head begins to turn. His neck feels heavy, wooden. He feels every degree of rotation, every click of his vertebrae. His gaze tears away from the fateful leaf and moves left, through the bright beam of light falling on the floor, to the figure of the woman sitting next to him, Naomi, his wife, the mother of his sick child. A child who is not his. She doesn't look at him. Her eyes are downcast. She's staring somewhere between her knees and her purse, as if her entire being has been concentrated in that single spot on the floor. Her shoulders, usually so straight and proud, are now slumped forward, forming a hunched, vulnerable line. Her entire posture screams capitulation, complete and utter defeat. No excuses, no tears, no attempts to deny anything. There is only this quiet, absolute submission to the truth that has finally come to light. Her hands are still resting on her purse, but her fingers are no longer clenched. They are relaxed, spread helplessly, like those of someone who has just let go of something very heavy and can no longer hold on to it. Between them, in this bright, sterile office, lies more than just silence. There lies an entire life that has been revealed as a fiction, and Naomi seemed to dissolve in this realization, becoming its silent monument. Minho's lips are dry. He tries to wet them, but his tongue feels cottony, not his own. Air won't enter his lungs. He takes a short, ragged breath and finally speaks. They come out quiet, hoarse, but they contain the last bulwark of his crumbling reality, the last bastion his mind desperately tries to hold on to. "That's a mistake," he says. The phrase hangs in the air. He says it not to the doctor, but rather to himself, like an incantation, like a mantra that should return everything to its place. An error in the lab. They mixed up the test tubes, the wrong tests, the wrong folder. His brain frantically throws up logical, rational explanations. He clings to them because the alternative is a precipice, beyond which lies emptiness. He repeats, now looking directly at Dr. Khan, and a familiar firmness, a familiar authority, creeps into his voice. It's the kind of tone that brooks no argument. "This is a mistake. Everything needs to be redone, immediately." Dr. Kang looks at him. There's no judgment in his eyes. No irritation, only the deep, weary sadness of a man who's seen worlds crumble too often in this very office. He doesn't argue. He simply shakes his head again, slowly and very emphatically. The movement says more than any words. No, not a mistake. Sorry. He doesn't even try to explain anything about double-checking, control samples, protocols. It's useless. The truth he just voiced needs no further proof. It simply is. And his silent, sad, negative gesture is the final nail in the coffin of all Minho's hopes that this was some kind of nightmare or a monstrous misunderstanding. Minho stands. The movement is abrupt, awkward. His knees buckle for a second, and he grabs the edge of the table to steady himself. His fingers dig into the polished wood. He pushes away from the table and straightens up. His body moves on its own, without the help of his mind. It doesn't know what to do, where to go, but it can't stay here any longer. In this room, under this doctor's gaze and this icy emanation of despair emanating from the woman next to him, he doesn't look at anyone else. He turns and walks to the door. His footsteps echo loudly in the silence of the office. He doesn't think about Naomi. He doesn't think about the doctor. He doesn't think about the sick girl in the room. His mind is a white, empty field. There is only the door. He needs to go out. He needs to leave here. He presses the handle, opens the door, and steps out into a white, silent corridor. The bright light from the hospital lamps glares at his eyes. He freezes for a second, blinded. Where to? Right, to Karen's room. Left, to the exit. Straight ahead, a long corridor to nowhere. He has no goal, no direction. He simply stands, lost, in the middle of this sterile labyrinth, and his enormous, commanding figure suddenly looks infinitely small and broken. There's a soft sound behind him, the creak of a door, light footsteps. He doesn't turn around, but he knows. It's Naomi. She's followed him out. She follows him like a shadow, but the distance between them is an abyss. He feels her presence somewhere behind him, feels her silent, terrified question, but he can't turn around. He can't bring himself to look at her. If he looks now, something irreversible will happen to him, so he just stands there, staring at the white wall opposite him, and she stands a few steps behind him, and this stretch of hospital corridor becomes for them the widest, most impassable space in the world. He can't take it anymore. The silence behind him is more oppressive than any scream. Minho turns around abruptly. His movement is too fast, almost aggressive. In the empty, neon-lit hallway, he sees her. Naomi is standing 10 steps away, her back pressed against the cold wall, as if trying to melt into it. Her hands are clenched into limp fists at her sides again. He takes 2 steps toward her, and she flinches, but doesn't retreat. Where to retreat? The wall is behind her, and he is ahead. He stops, not coming close. The space between them is still vast, but now it is filled not just with silence, but with a whole universe of pain, lies, and 7 years of deception. He looks at her. He peers into her features, which he seemed to know as if they were his own, into her eyes, which he once called his stars, into her lips, which so many times whispered words of love to him. He searches for something familiar in them, the woman he married, but he sees only a stranger. The person who lived under the same roof with him, slept in the same bed, rubbed his temples after a hard day, and all this time carried within herself this monstrous secret. His voice, when he finally speaks, is low, choked. He doesn't shout. There's not even anger in it, only an icy, bottomless demand, a single word that contains all the world's questions. Explain. This isn't a request. It's a condemned man being led to the scaffold and asked to state his final wish. This is his last chance, one he's giving not to her, but to himself. Perhaps now she'll say something that will change everything, something that will make this nightmare crumble, some crazy, impossible story he desperately wants to believe. He waits. His entire world, or rather, what's left of it, hangs on the edge of her next sentence. Naomi slowly looks up at him, and what he sees there crushes the last of his hopes. There are no tears in her eyes, no plea for forgiveness, not even the fear of his wrath, which it seems she should have been waiting for years. There's emptiness in them, a deep, scorched, absolute emptiness of a person who's reached the edge and is staring into an abyss. All the lies, all the tension, all the weight of these 7 years seem to have flowed out of her, leaving behind only this empty shell. But in the depths of this emptiness, as if at the bottom of a dry well, lies the truth. A heavy, ugly, naked truth that she's kept within herself like a black, burning coal. And now this truth glows through the emptiness of her gaze. She no longer hides it. She puts it on display, because hiding it no longer makes sense. The game is over. She looks at him, and in that look lies the entire story of their collapse. There are no excuses. There is only fact. Her lips are slightly parted, as if trying to breathe air that is in short supply. She looks older than her years, tired to the core. And in this tired, empty frankness of hers, there is something more terrifying than any hysteria or torrent of tears. It is the calm after disaster. She doesn't look away. She doesn't move. She simply stands, leaning against the wall, looking at him with her empty, truthful eyes. And when she finally speaks, her voice is barely audible. It's no more than a whisper, the dry rustle of leaves in a dead forest. But in the silence of the hospital corridor, every word falls like a weight. Her father! She pauses briefly, as if the word burns her tongue. Jinho, 3 words. Her father is Jinho. There are no details, no story. No, sorry. There is only a name, the name of the person who was part of their lives every day, whom he trusted more than his brother, who stood by his side for 20 years, who smiled at his daughter and gave her toys, who organized the best doctors to save his daughter. The name Jinho rings out louder than any scream in this white hallway. It echoes off the walls, off the ceiling, returning and piercing Minho like sharp shards. Everything suddenly falls into place with terrifying, screaming clarity. Naomi's strange detachment, her panic when the tests were needed, her inability to look him or Jinho in the eye. All those little cracks in their perfect life that he ignored, chalking it up to stress, fatigue, or moodiness. They all add up to one clear, disgusting picture. He doesn't ask when. He doesn't ask why. He doesn't ask how long, because this name is the key that unlocks everything. And he realizes he doesn't want to know the details. He can't bear them. This very knowledge, this fact, that's the weight that's pressing down on him now, making the ground shift from under his feet. Jinho, his shadow, his right hand, his father, Father Heron. The world hasn't simply collapsed. It's become an alien, twisted sham, where everything he believed in has been revealed as a lie. And the main liar stands before him, her eyes empty, delivering her verdict. Minho freezes. The word Jinho hangs in the air between them, and time stands still for him. He doesn't breathe. He doesn't blink. He simply stands, and his world, the very world that was just bursting at the seams, now completely collapses. Not with a crash, but with a quiet, chilling sound of thin ice breaking underfoot. He falls into emptiness. His daughter, Karen, her laughter, her trusting eyes, her small hand in his. All the memories, all the love, all the paternal pride, all of it now takes on a poisonous, alien hue. These 7 years weren't his. He raised her, loved her, feared for someone else's blood. His greatest joy turned out to be his greatest deception. Her face now seems like a riddle, in which he can't discern a single feature of himself, only the features of that other, his right hand, Jinho. 20 years side by side, trust that didn't require words. The man he would entrust his life, his business, his family to. Turns out, he entrusted too much. This man had been looking at him all this time and knew while Minho was making plans for his daughter's future, knew when he helped organize her birthdays, knew right now, organizing the doctors. The betrayal wasn't a momentary act. It was a quiet, drawn-out backdrop to their lives, stretching out over years. His wife, Naomi, the woman he considered his refuge from the outside world, she wasn't his ally. She was an accomplice in this deception. She looked him in the eye every day and lied. She allowed him to love a child that wasn't his. She built this beautiful, sturdy cage with him, inside which he was the dominant yet lonely fool. Everything that made sense, and the basis of his existence, crumbles to dust in an instant. He stands in the middle of a white corridor, and it feels like it's about to crumble along with him. At that moment, a figure appears at the end of the corridor, leading to the stairs. Quietly, without a sound, it's Jinho. He's holding an envelope of documents, probably more certificates or contracts from the clinic, which he'd agreed to bring, as he was always asked to do. His appearance was always discreet and timely. He takes a few steps forward, and his gaze falls on them. On Minho, standing in the middle of the hallway, pale, with the face of someone who has just survived a catastrophe. On Naomi, pressed against the wall, her face devastated, white, and her eyes full of silent truth. Jinho stops. The size of his steps freezes in midair. He doesn't say a word. He just looks at the way they stand, at the impassable gap between them, at the expression on Minho's face. And he understands. He understands everything at a glance. This isn't just a fight over illness. This isn't just tension. This is the end. The truth has been unleashed. The game that lasted 7 years is over. His face, usually the picture of control, goes completely blank for a moment, the mask falling away, revealing only exhaustion and the bitter knowledge that this day will come. He slowly lowers his hand with the envelope. The documents are now meaningless. Minho senses this presence. His gaze, clouded by internal collapse, slowly breaks away from Naomi. and slides to the end of the hallway. He sees Jinho. He sees his frozen figure, his hand holding useless papers, his face, its familiar mask of officialdom gone. And in that moment, anger doesn't rise in Minho. No fury arises to be released in a scream, in a blow. Anger would be too hot, too human. There's nothing human about it. It's filled with icy, absolute bewilderment. It's the feeling of a child who suddenly discovers that the laws of physics don't apply, that the sky isn't blue, and the ground beneath his feet isn't solid. He looks at the person who was once a part of himself and can't comprehend how this is possible. His lips move on their own, without any mental command. What comes out isn't a scream, not a roar. A single, short, muffled word emerges, a question and a statement at the same time. It sounds quiet, but in the silent hallway, it rings out like a gunshot. You? One syllable. It contains a sea of questions. Is it really you? How could you? Why? For what purpose? When? But Minho can't ask them out loud. He can only pronounce this appeal, this name, in the form of a question, looking at the one he considered an extension of his will. And there is no hatred in his gaze. There is only icy, incomprehensible amazement, as if he is looking not at a person, but at a complex, absurd machine that he considered a part of himself all these years, only to find it to be something entirely different and hostile. Jinho is silent. He doesn't look away. He doesn't try to deny, justify, or explain anything. He simply stands. His body, usually composed and ready for action, now seems slightly hunched, as if under an invisible weight. He accepts Minho's gaze, a gaze of icy, silent bewilderment. He absorbs it the way he once absorbed orders and instructions. This is his sentence, and he doesn't resist. His face is a mask of resignation, no trace of his former confidence or the quiet strength that always radiated from him. There is only acceptance, acceptance of the consequences. He knew this day could come. Maybe he had even imagined it 1,000 times, but no imagination could compare to the reality, to the way the man to whom he owed everything looked at him now. There is more truth in this silence from Jinho than in any words. This silence is confirmation, a sign that there will be no battle, that all he could do was stand here and wait for what would happen next. He lowers his eyes for a second, then raises them again to Minho, surrendering himself to his will. His arms hang by his sides, the envelope trembling slightly in his fingers. Naomi's voice breaks the silence. It sounds sharp, loud after the silent scene between the men. She starts speaking quickly, choking on her words, as if she's afraid she'll be stopped, interrupted, not allowed to finish, or as if she's afraid that if she stops, she'll never be able to bring herself to utter another word. She doesn't look at either Minho or Jinho. She speaks into space at the white wall in front of her, her words flowing like a stream, tripping over each other. You were always busy, Minho, she begins, and her voice is thick with old, ingrained resentments. You were building your empire. Days, nights, weeks. I was alone in these empty rooms. I was scared, not of anything in particular, but of everything. Of this silence, of this anticipation. I was a stranger here. To your people, to this city, just a pretty accessory on your hand. She talks about a fleeting moment of weakness, about how it only happened once, many years ago, one of those evenings when Minho was late again, and Jinho brought some papers and found her in tears. He was there. He was the only one who saw her as more than just the boss's wife, but a frightened, lonely woman. He said a few words of comfort. He offered a shoulder, and in that moment of despair and thirst for at least some human warmth, she made a mistake. One and only. A fatal one. I didn't mean to, she blurts out, her voice breaking for a moment. It was stupid. A moment of weakness. And then it was too late to change anything. She catches her breath, her chest rising and falling. The flow of words continues, but now the tone changes. Her voice becomes quieter, but no less insistent. I wanted to tell you. At first, I couldn't find the words. Then I was afraid. You wouldn't forgive. You would destroy everything. Our life. His, me. And then, when I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. I didn't know whose child it was. I prayed for it to be yours. I prayed every day. She finally turns her face to Minho, but her gaze still slides past him, not meeting his eyes. And then Karine was born. And you changed. You looked at her as if she were a miracle. You, always so hard and closed, melted in her presence. She became your everything, the center of your universe. And I saw it, and I realized that I can't take it away. I can't tell you the truth and take this light from you. She has a father who adores her. You have a daughter for whom you would do anything. I tried to make our home happy. I tried. For her, for you. Her words echo a desperate attempt to justify the lie, as if it were a good thing. She says she kept silent, not out of meanness, but out of fear of destroying the fragile, true love that had blossomed between Minho and the child. She presents herself not as a traitor, but as the guardian of someone else's happiness, a hostage to her own lies. But the truth breaks through these justifications. She was afraid of the consequences, afraid of his wrath, afraid of losing everything they had. And this fear proved stronger than honesty, stronger than their marriage. It lasted 7 years. Naomi's words flow like a torrent of justifications, but they crash against Minho's stony face. He doesn't hear her, or rather, he hears only white noise, in which fragments flicker. Loneliness, weakness, afraid. It doesn't matter. The story she tells is long since dust in the wind. Her fear, her reasons, all that was 7 years ago. Now there is only the fact, and the child in the hospital room. And then, as her voice begins to weaken, withering under the weight of her own explanations, she utters the last words she has. Her voice drops to a whisper, quiet, stifled, but it contains the only truth she can offer him now. She looks straight at him, and something like a desperate plea appears in her eyes. She loves you like a father. Only you. These words hang in the air differently now. They're not an excuse. They're a fact. The most important, the most irrefutable fact in this entire story. Beyond biology, beyond DNA, beyond betrayal, Karen's love, her childish, absolute adoration, the way she runs into the office, screaming, "Daddy!" The way she falls asleep on his shoulder, the way she confides in him, her little fears and her greatest joys. Naomi says it like a mantra, like a last anchor to cling to in this chaos. She's not talking about herself, not about the past. She's talking about the present, about the connection Minho feels in every fiber of his being. She offers him this. Not her guilt, but his daughter, the way she's always been for him. Minho closes his eyes. He's forced to do so because the world around him begins to blur. Instead of the white hospital corridor, images begin to appear before him. He thinks about Karine, not the sick one, not the one whose blood they just analyzed, but the living, vibrant girl, his own. How she laughs, heartily, carefreely, throwing her head back, and this laughter fills even the largest and quietest house with the sounds of happiness. How she waits for him to come home from work. She sits on the windowsill in the living room, her nose pressed to the glass, her silhouette visible even from the car. How, upon hearing the key in the lock, she leaps up and runs to the door to be the first to shout, "Daddy's home!" The way she called him daddy, not father, not by his first name. Daddy, that word, coming from her lips, was more than just a title for him. It was a confession, acceptance, a sign that he was doing everything right. When she said it, hugging him around the neck before bed, the whole hard, cruel world left behind. All these memories now pierce him with a new, painful sharpness. It wasn't his blood, but it was his love. Not his genes, but his care. Not his biological daughter, but his child in every way that mattered to him. He thinks about how he felt when he taught her to ride a bike, when he caught her after a fall, when he wiped away her tears from a scraped knee. These feelings were real. They can't be faked just because a fact in a medical record has changed. But then, like a knife, another thought pierces. What if in her smile, in some gesture, in the turn of her head, he subconsciously saw Jinho and didn't recognize her? He hates himself for this thought, but it comes. His memory frantically sifts through thousands of moments, searching for the catch, distorting them. His love and his pain begin an unbearable war right inside him. His eyelids lift. He can't stay in that safe, warm past. He returns to the cold, white corridor. His gaze, heavy and slow, moves from Naomi to Jinho. He still stands motionless, like a condemned man awaiting his fate. There's no challenge in Jinho's eyes, not even hope. There's only deep, bottomless weariness, and the realization of the full gravity of what he's done. He's been reading every thought on Minho's face for 20 years. Now he sees there the collapse of an entire world, and he knows he was the architect of that collapse. Jinho finally lowers his head. It's not a bow. It's a sign of final defeat, a break. He can no longer bear that gaze. His voice, when he speaks, is hoarse and lifeless, devoid of any intonation. He utters words that seem memorized over the years he's carried this secret within himself. "I have no forgiveness, boss." He uses that word, boss, not his name, not Minho, boss. Emphasizing the depth of his fall, he betrayed not only a friend, but also the one to whom he swore allegiance. He broke the cardinal law of his own world. I'll leave. Simple, clear. He offers the simplest solution. Eliminate himself. Disappear. As if his physical absence could fix anything. As if erasing him from the picture would mend the broken mirror of their lives. He asks for nothing. He doesn't remind them of 20 years of service. He simply states what he understands must happen. His departure is the least he can do, the last service he can render. Jinho's words reach him as if through thick glass. I'm leaving! They don't register. They bring neither relief nor a fresh surge of rage. His inner world has narrowed to two contradictory realities that coexist, tearing him apart. He thinks of the little girl who is sick, right now in a room on this floor. Her breathing might be ragged. Her forehead is burning. She is afraid and sick. Her small body is fighting an invisible enemy. Instinctively, on a level deeper than reason, he feels the urge to go there, to sit next to her, to take her hand, to tell her that Daddy is here and everything will be okay. It is a physical need, a reflex honed over 7 years. And then, like an electric shock, a second thought follows, about the girl who is not his, whose blood carries nothing of his, whose genes are a mixture of Naomi and the man standing 10 steps away, the same blood that was just analyzed. All these years he hugged, kissed, cherished the fruit of betrayal. He poured his soul into her, and she was a living, breathing monument to his naivety and their lies. These two images, a sick child in need of protection and a stranger's child, a symbol of the collapse of his life, don't merge. They clash inside him, creating a sickening, dizzying emptiness. What should he feel? What does he have the right to feel? Love can't be turned off with a flick of the switch, but can it now exist in its pure form, untainted by this knowledge? He finds no answer. He's simply stuck in this cruel contradiction, unable to take a single step toward the ward or the exit. His gaze, wandering in the void before him, slowly focuses on Jinho. He still stands with his head bowed, waiting. Minho realizes he heard his words. Leave is too simple, too abstract. There are things more important now than punishment. He needs to understand the scale of the disaster, the limits of his shame. His voice, when he finally speaks, is quiet and hoarse. There's no threat in it. There's only a need to know. He's asking a question that will determine whether any fragment of his former life remains intact. Who knows? Just 2 words. But they contain the full horror of public humiliation. Do people know him? His enemies? Are they laughing behind his back? Was his life, his status, his love for his daughter, the subject of secret whispers and ridicule for everyone but himself? He looks at Jinho, demanding an answer, not as a boss, but as a man who has been robbed of everything, including the right to personal grief. Jinho raises his head. His gaze meets Minho's, and there's no lie in it, only a tired, bleak clarity. He understands what's being asked, and his answer is perhaps the only small favor he can give right now. A final favor. Nobody, just us. He says it clearly, without hesitation. He includes himself, Naomi, and Minho in this we, no one else. This is their shared, closed universe of shame and lies. None of his people knew, none of her few friends. Not the doctors then, 7 years ago, nor now until this moment. The secret was complete. This was not a public disgrace. It was a deeply personal, intimate betrayal, kept between 3, where 2 knew and 1 was blind. This answer should bring relief, and it does. A tiny drop in the sea of pain. At least his world hasn't been mocked. His dignity hasn't been trampled in public. But this privacy of the disaster makes it even more bitter, because it means that all these years their perfect family really did look perfect from the outside. No one saw the cracks because they were skillfully hidden. He lived in an artfully crafted prop, and even the audience believed it was authentic. And now he will have to destroy this prop himself, in silence, without witnesses. His battle will be utterly alone. The movement feels alien. His body performs it on its own, without being ordered. Minho turns his back on Naomi and Jinho. He doesn't look at them anymore. Their presence, their words, their very existence are just noise now. The only reality that has any tangible meaning right now is beyond the door, at the end of this hallway. A child lies there. His feet carry him back to Heron's room. His steps are firm but empty. Inside, there's a hurricane of fragmented thoughts, images, pain. He needs to make a decision. About Naomi, about Jinho, about how to live on, how to look in the mirror, how to breathe. But these questions are enormous, monstrous. They press, and they make him want to curl up into a ball and disappear. But there's something else, something simpler and more urgent. Before thinking about tomorrow, about this whole shattered life, he must do one thing. He must be with her, with Karen. The disease doesn't ask for documents or DNA tests. The disease is here, real and cruel. And while she's here, in this clinic, he is the one this girl calls to when she's scared. Even if everything else is a lie, that cry of hers in the night, her trusting hand in his, it was real, for her, And perhaps for now, for him too. He approaches the door to the room. His hand rests on this handle. He pauses for a second, gathering all that remains of him into a fist. He can't enter her room with the expression he has now. He has to change it, make an effort, for her. He inhales, exhales slowly, and his features relax slightly, losing the edge of icy shock. The mask is ready. He presses the handle and enters. The room is quiet. Only the bedside lamp is on, casting a soft orange glow on the walls. The girl is asleep. Her breathing is shallow, slightly hoarse. Her face, usually so lively, is now pale and fragile, like a porcelain doll. Dark eyelashes rest on her cheeks. She seems even smaller, sunken in the hospital bed. Minho walks over and sits down in the same chair where he spent those sleepless hours earlier. He looks at her. That strange, divided wave rises within him again, tenderness mixed with a sharp, piercing sense of alienness. Does he see something now that he hadn't seen before? Or is it just his imagination? The shape of her eyebrows, the curve of her lips? He pushes these thoughts away. They are toxic. He can't think about it now. Carefully, so as not to wake her, he reaches out and takes her hand in his. Her hand is hot and clammy with heat, small. Exactly the same as yesterday, and the day before, and all 7 years before that. The same tiny fingers, the same lines on the palm that he knew by heart, playing magpie with her. It is the same hand that squeezed his finger in the maternity hospital, the same hand that hesitantly traced the first letters, the same hand that trustingly lay in his when they drew her blood. The physical reality of this touch outweighs everything else. Genes are an abstraction. This is warmth, weight, life. His thumb automatically begins to make light, soothing movements over her knuckles, the way he always did when she was feeling ill. It's a gesture honed over the years, a father's gesture. No matter what, love doesn't disappear in an instant. It can't be turned off like a light with a lab report. It doesn't live in DNA. It lives in habits, in the memory of the body, in the sound of laughter that still echoes somewhere in the chest, in the fear that constricts the throat when you see her pale and sick. Minho sits and holds her hand, and this love hasn't gone anywhere. It's here. It's evident in his posture, in his anxious gaze, in his willingness to sit here all night, like the previous ones. But now it hurts. It's no longer a pure, bright feeling. It's pierced by fragments of betrayal, mistrust, pain. Every memory of her first word, first step, first day of school now has a double meaning. He was happy, and the other two knew a terrible secret. His happiness was based on a lie. Love has become a wound, deep, throbbing. He loves this child, and this love now physically hurts, because it connects him to those he now hates, because it makes him vulnerable, because now he doesn't know who he really is to her, and he's afraid to find out. He looks at her sleeping face and feels his heart squeeze with tenderness, and then a sharp sting of resentment and loss. He loves, but this love has become a heavy, excruciating burden, a source of unbearable pain for which there is no cure. He can't throw it away, but he can no longer bear it as before. He is locked in this pain, and the key is in the hands of a sleeping girl who has no idea that the world has just turned upside down. Naomi remains at the threshold of the hospital room. Her hand rests on the cold metal frame, but she cannot take the final step inside. Through the half-open door, she sees Minho sitting hunched over, holding Heron's hand. His back, usually so straight and confident, now looks broken. The light from the nightlight outlines his silhouette, turning him into a shadow of himself. Something sacred and terrible is happening in this room now. A man's struggle with the truth he has just learned. And Naomi feels she has no right to enter. She is the cause of this pain. Her presence will desecrate this moment. She is a stranger now, both in this room and in his life. She simply stands, her forehead pressed against the doorframe, and listens to her daughter's quiet, uneven breathing. Each breath resonates with sharp pain in Naomi. She has destroyed everything. Not just the marriage, not just the trust. She'd jeopardized the only thing pure and true in her life, her daughter's love for the man she considered her father. And now she's afraid to even speak, to make a single sound, lest she destroy the last thing that might still keep Minho near this bed. In the hallway, a few meters away, Jinho stands motionless. He's not leaning against the wall. He's standing at attention, hands at his sides, like a soldier awaiting orders. But there won't be any orders. He's awaiting the verdict. His gaze is fixed on a single spot on the floor. He doesn't look at the door to the hospital room. He doesn't look at Naomi. He's completely withdrawn. He knows that his future, everything he's built over 20 years, his place in this world, all of it is now being decided behind this wooden door by one man. The outcome depends not on logic, not on past achievements, but on which emotion prevails in Minho at this hour. Love for the girl, or hatred of deception. Jinho is prepared for any outcome. He's already mentally said goodbye to everything. His suitcase is already packed in his mind. He's simply waiting for the formality, waiting to be exiled. This is the only thing he can control now, his dignified, uncomplaining disappearance. He doesn't even allow himself to think about Karen. These thoughts are forbidden. They are too painful. He has the right to think only about his guilt and his punishment. Minho sits like this for an hour. Time loses its meaning. It is measured only by the beating of Heron's heart beneath his fingers and the endless stream of memories flashing before his eyes like a cursed film. He recalls every second of the past 7 years, deliberately, intently, like an investigator searching for clues in a solved case. Karen's birth, his tears, which he hid from everyone then, his first smile, his first daddy, how he carried her on his shoulders through the park, and she squealed with delight. How she had chickenpox, and he and Naomi took turns keeping vigil at her bedside. How they chose her first school. How she brought him her first drawing and gave it to him. He peers into these images from the past, looking for a clue. Looking for the moment when he should have realized something was wrong. Maybe the day Jinho stayed at their house to help with the shelf in the nursery, or the time Naomi looked away strangely while chatting with Jinho about some trivial matter. Perhaps in a gesture, in a tone, but nothing. No hints. In his memory, it all looks like a perfect, shining life. Naomi's smiles were genuine. Jinho's care was unobtrusive and devoted. His own joy was absolutely genuine. There were no cracks, no whispers behind his back, no strange looks. There was simply a happy family. He, strong and successful. She, beautiful and loving. He, a loyal and reliable assistant. And in the center, a radiant, beloved girl. And now he understands that this was the most exquisite torture. There was no malice in each day. There was no theater. They weren't playing roles. They were living. Naomi was probably trying to forget that one time and immerse herself in the role of a happy wife and mother. Jinho was probably suppressing everything within himself and serving even harder, trying to atone for his guilt. And he, Minho, was simply happy. He accepted this happy life at face value. He was the lead actor in the play, unaware that the plot hadn't been written by him, and that for the other two actors, it was a completely different story. His happiness was real, but the soil on which it grew was rotten. And now that that soil has caved in, all his happiness has come crashing down, leaving behind only the bitter, acrid smoke of memories that are now poisoned. He lived in a beautiful, sturdy house and didn't know that its foundation was a lie. And this realization becomes unbearably bitter. It would have been easier if he had at least suspected something, but no. He was blind, trusting, happy, and that was his greatest failure. Finally, he emerges. His movements are slow, like those of a very old or very tired man. He carefully disengages his hand from Karen's and places it on the blanket. He looks at her face for another second, then rises. His joints creak from sitting so long without moving. He feels every bone, every muscle. He opens the door and steps out into the hallway. The bright light after the sea light of the room makes him squint. When he opens his eyes, he sees them. Naomi still stands against the wall next to the door. She hasn't moved. Her eyes, red from unshed tears, stare at him wide-eyed, filled with silent question and fear. She sees his face and tries to read the verdict in it, but his face is expressionless. It's simply tired, empty. Jinho, hearing footsteps, raises his head. He straightens up, adopting his usual collected posture. But there's no strength in it now. There's only readiness. His gaze is also fixed on Minho. He's waiting. His thoughts are already on the suitcase. They both look at him. 3 people in a white, silent corridor. Between them lies a 7-year-long story, 20 years of friendship, tons of lies, and one sick child on the other side of the door. The air is charged with anticipation. No one breathes. Even the clock on the wall seems frozen. Minho looks at them one by one, first at Naomi, then at Jinho. He sees their fear, their guilt, their anticipation of retribution. But there's no room inside him for the satisfaction of their fear right now. There's only an immense, all-consuming fatigue and the heavy, cold knowledge that he now needs to make decisions. Decisions that will change everything forever. And the first of those decisions is already forming in his head, crystallizing from the chaos of pain and memories. He stands before them, and his silence is more painful to them than any screams. They wait for him to speak, for him to unleash his wrath on them, for him to declare his will. And he will speak now. But first, he needs to catch his breath. Take one last breath from the era when he still believed his world was real. His voice, when he finally speaks, is flat, devoid of any intonation. There's no anger, no pain, no triumph in it. It's the voice of a declaration, the affirmation of a new, newly created law. He stares into the space between them, focusing on no one in particular. She stays with me. The sentence falls into the silence, heavy and final. There's no question in these words. No discussion. It's the judge's decision, final and irrevocable. He doesn't even look at Naomi as he says it. depriving her of the opportunity to object. Then he pauses briefly, as if testing the sound of the next words, before releasing them into the world. She is my daughter. He's not saying this for them. He's saying it for himself. He's affirming it. He's proclaiming it. It's an act of will. An attempt to force his vision onto reality. Biology is just data on paper. The fact of her life, her love for him, his 7 years of care, that's what counts. That's what he chooses as truth. And the last, most demanding condition, his gaze finally slides to Naomi, then to Jinho, taking them both into one field of vision. His voice grows even quieter, but that makes every word ring out even clearer, like ice. She will never know any other truth. This is a sentence for them too, a lifetime of silence. They will have to carry this lie on, but now by his rules. They have no right to unburden themselves of this burden, to ease their conscience. They have no right to tell Harren who her biological father is. They will guard this secret to the end, because that's what he wants. Because it's the only way he sees now to preserve for the girl the world she lived in. A world where her father is Minho. He cuts off their path to sincerity, to a possible explanation in the distant future. He seals the past forever. For Harren, it must remain as she knows it. It is both his revenge and his protection to leave them in the shadow of the lie they themselves created. Jinho nods, once. Briefly and clearly, his face expresses nothing but understanding and acceptance. There's a monstrous justice to these circumstances. He loses everything, his place next to Minho, his position, the right to see his daughter grow up. But he's also freed from the burden of active deception. His role is now passive, to remain silent. This is the punishment he deserves, and he accepts it without complaint. I'm ready for anything, he says quietly. These words mean more than just agreement. They mean he's ready to disappear, ready to never appear in their lives again. Ready to live with this knowledge, completely alone. He doesn't ask how, when, or where. He simply agrees. This is the final favor, the final manifestation of that devotion that was once genuine and then became perverted. He gives him complete control over the situation and over his destiny. In this nod, there is a final break. He is no longer the right hand. He is the man who will carry out the final order and disappear. He looks at Minho, and in his gaze there is no longer hope or fear, only the emptiness of a man who has reached the end of his road and now simply awaits instructions on where to take his final step. He gives him his will, his life, as payment for that single, unforgivable mistake that has unraveled 20 years of loyalty. He's willing to do whatever Minho orders, because any punishment would be easier than that icy calm look he gives him. Minho turns to Jinho. His gaze is direct, unwavering. There's no malice in it, no desire to prolong the moment. There's only the practical need to remove the source of the threat, the problem, the person, like removing a broken mechanism that can't be fixed. You're leaving, he says. His voice is even, not raising. Far away, forever. This isn't a proposal. This isn't a discussion of terms. This is a fact, stated out loud, like a weather forecast, like a train schedule. You're leaving. It's already happening. Minho isn't saying, I want you to leave, or I need you to leave. He's stating Jinho's future. He's defining it, and that's where all the distance remaining between them lies. From now on, Minho decides for him. Jinho is no longer human. He's a task to be solved, deleted, crossed out. The words far away and forever require no explanation. This isn't an exile to another city. This is a disappearance. Off the face of his earth, off the map of his world. No letters, no chance encounters, no news. Jinho must become a ghost who never existed. This is a condition not only for his own comfort, but also for the safety of the new, fragile reality Minho has just decreed to create around Heie-rin. As long as Jinho is somewhere nearby, even in another country, he is a living reminder, a risk, a weak spot. He must not exist. Period. Minho doesn't add threats. He doesn't say what will happen if Jinho disobeys the order. There's no need. The very fact that it's spoken is both a sentence and a guarantee of its execution. Jinho knows the mechanics. He knows how people are monitored. He knows that forever isn't a figure of speech. All that remains of their 20 years is the efficiency with which one can erase the other. Then his gaze slowly, heavily shifts to Naomi. She's still pressed against the wall, her eyes wide, full of fear and anticipation. She's just heard Jinho's verdict. Her own hangs in the air. Minho looks at her, but there's no longer the anger or pain in his gaze that was there before. There's no longer the cold determination he had with Jinho. There's something analytical in his gaze now. Evaluation, weighing, "And you?" he says. One short question. But it's not addressed to his wife, not to the woman he loved, not to the traitor. This question is addressed to her other self, the only one who matters in the new world he's building. He looks at her as the mother of his daughter. There's a practical calculation in that look. Karen is ill. She's grown accustomed to her mother. She calls her at night. She trusts her. Her world has already been shaken by illness. To tear her mother away from it would mean inflicting a new, possibly irreparable trauma. She needs stability. She needs care. She needs a familiar face, a voice, a scent. But can he bear her presence? Can he live under the same roof with a living reminder of betrayal? With the woman who looked him in the eye all these years and lied to him? His question, "And you?" isn't an offer to stay. It's a demand that she make a choice and voice it. He wants to hear what she's willing to offer, what role she can play now, what benefit she can bring to Karen, what price she's willing to pay for the right to remain close to her daughter. He waits. His face is unreadable. Her entire fate, her future, her bond with the child, all of it now hinges on her next words, on whether she can offer herself not as a wife or a lover, but as an instrument for the girl's well-being, and on whether Minho will find this instrument useful enough to tolerate. Naomi freezes. She understands the subtext. She's not simply answering the question, stay or go. She must prove her worth, pass a cold, emotionless selection, and the despair in her eyes mingles with a tiny, feeble hope. There's a chance, not for forgiveness, not for love, but for the chance to be with Karen. And for that, it seems, she's willing to do anything. Naomi looks at him, and it seems she can't breathe. Minho's question hangs in the air like a sharp blade. She knows her answer must be perfect. It must be devoid of ego, excuses, or pleas for leniency. It must be about her, not for her. She straightens up, pulling away from the wall. Her hands clasp in front of her, not in pleading, but in an attempt to muster the last shreds of dignity. She doesn't lower her eyes. She looks straight at him, and in her gaze, there's less fear now, and more of that very truth that burned everything to ashes. "I'm staying with her." She starts with this, with the most important thing, not, "I want to stay," not, "Let me stay." A statement of fact mirroring his own tone. But it is a fact about her function, about her role. She is a mother. The sick child needs her. This is her territory, her only indisputable truth in this chaos. And then, with a tiny pause, she adds the second part. Her voice becomes quieter, filled with that fragile, almost non-existent hope that springs from the ashes. "And with you, if you allow." She doesn't say, "my husband." She doesn't say, "in our family." She says, "you," as a person, as the father of her child, as the force that now determines the rules. She doesn't assume she has the right to do this. She makes it dependent on his will. If you allow it, this is not a condition. This is a request for access. She offers herself as part of a system necessary for the functioning of the most important thing, Karen's well-being. She offers her presence, her care, her knowledge of the child in exchange for the right to be near. She gives him complete control over herself in this new, ugly arrangement of their life. She is ready to live on his terms, in his space, as a reminder, and as a servant, if only not to lose her daughter. There is no demand in her voice when she says these words. Only emptiness, and that thin, almost imperceptible tremor of the last hope that she will be considered useful enough to be tolerated. Minho doesn't answer. He doesn't nod or shake his head. He simply turns away from her. His gaze searches for support and finds it in the large window at the end of the hallway. He takes a few steps toward it, leaving Naomi and Jinho behind, in a zone of uncertainty. Outside the window is a city, his city. It is already sinking into the evening twilight. Lights are coming on. The silhouettes of skyscrapers are visible. Streams of traffic are moving. Everything is in its place. Everything is working. His empire is intact. The networks he built, the connections, the power, the money, it's all still here. It didn't collapse from the news that turned his inner world upside down. It is indifferent to his personal drama. It demands his attention, his decisions, his strength. Outside, there is order, cruel, but understandable. But inside, his family is gone. What he thought was family no longer exists. It shattered an hour ago in the doctor's office. All that remains are fragments. The woman who betrayed him, the man he considered a brother, and a child who is simultaneously his everything and nothing. But one fragment, the biggest, the sharpest, is still there. One part of this family sleeps in the room behind him. She's breathing hard, she's feverish, she's scared. And she needs him, not Minho the boss, not the owner of an empire. She needs her dad, the one who holds her hand and tells her everything will be okay. This need is the only thing that feels like real, undeniable truth in this whole nightmare. He looks at the darkening sky, at the lights coming on, and feels incredibly tired. He needs to make a decision about Naomi, about whether he will be able to see her every day stay. But this decision no longer seems as important as it did a moment ago, because he has already made the main decision. Karen is staying with him. Karen is his daughter. Everything else is details. The conditions of detention. Naomi could be one of those conditions, a useful tool, or a source of constant pain. He doesn't know yet, but he knows that the choice will be made not because of her, but because of the child sleeping in the ward. He stands by the window, his face reflected in the glass over a painting of the city. It looks alien. A man caught between two worlds, an entire empire outside, and a ruined fortress within. And his next word, his next step, will be a bridge between them, or a barricade. Naomi freezes, hearing his question and receiving no answer. His silence stretches on, becoming heavier than any scream. She sees his back by the window, his motionless figure, against the backdrop of a strange, indifferent city. Every second of silence feels like a step into the abyss. She can already feel the cold emptiness beneath her feet. The chance to stay with Karen melts away like smoke. She's ready to fall to her knees, to beg, but her body is frozen. She understands that no amount of pleading will help now. Only practical benefit. Only function. What if he finds her unnecessary? What if her presence is harmful? She closes her eyes, and her daughter's face appears before her, pale, defenseless. This face gives her the strength to simply stand and wait. Wait for the verdict. Jinho is silent too. He heard Minho's question and Naomi's answer. His own fate has already been sealed. He's waiting for this conversation to end, to receive his final instructions and disappear. He stares at the floor, disengaging himself, trying not to hear, not to feel. He's no longer here in his mind. He's a ghost, simply hanging around to wait out the formalities. Minho stands by the window, feeling the weight of their gaze on his back. The city lights begin to blur into streaks. There's emptiness inside him, but it's a strange, distinct emptiness, like the fatigue after a long battle. All his feelings, rage, pain, bewilderment, have burned away, leaving behind cold ash and a single crystal-clear thought. What's best for Heron? He doesn't think about his own comfort, about revenge, about justice. These concepts now seem childish and abstract to him. There is a fact. The girl is sick. She will be sick, perhaps for a long time. She needs care. She needs stability. She needs familiar faces. Ripping her mother from her world now is an act of cruelty that will not fix the past, but will certainly break her future. Naomi is the best nurse for Karen. She knows her every birthmark, every cry, every habit. She will watch by her bedside, not sleeping at night. She will fight for her with the doctors, because she is her mother. And what about him? He can be there, but not always. He has an empire that doesn't forgive weakness. He needs someone he can trust with what's most important. Who? Someone else's nanny? A nurse? No, there's only her. The one who betrayed him, but never a child. There was no hatred for Karen in her betrayal. There was weakness, fear, stupidity, but a mother's love is a power unto itself, and he can entrust his daughter to this power, not his wife, his mother. He takes a step, not toward Naomi, not toward Jinho. He takes a step toward the room, toward the door where his daughter sleeps. This movement decides everything. It shows priority. Everything else is noise. And then, already grasping the pen, without turning around, he speaks. His voice is quiet, even, without emotion. He doesn't look at Naomi as he speaks. He speaks into space, as if giving an order to a subordinate. Go to her. She'll wake up and be scared alone. This isn't forgiveness. There's not a drop of warmth in those words. It's an order, an assignment. He assigns her to a post at the sick child's bedside. This is her job now, her duty, her atonement. He doesn't say, stay. He says, go to her. Now, do your job. Be useful. But for Naomi, these words are like a breath of air for a drowning man. Not happiness, not joy. An overwhelming, icy relief. She hasn't won her husband or her family back. She has been given permission to fulfill her role. She can stay close to her daughter. That's all she can hope for now, and that's all she needs. She nods, though he can't see her. Tears finally well up in her eyes, but they are quiet, almost invisible. She's not sobbing. She simply quickly, almost silently, passes him into the room, slipping through the crack of the half-open door like a shadow. She goes to the bed, sits down in her old place, and carefully, with a trembling hand, adjusts the blanket over Karen. She's on duty. She will be on duty. Minho doesn't follow her right away. He turns and looks at Jinho. He's already looked up, having heard the decision. Understanding is in his eyes. Everything is decided. You're supposed to be out of town in 2 hours, Minho says. No details. No, pack your things. Jinho is a pro. He knows how to disappear. You'll get everything you need to get started there. We're not talking anymore. Ever. Jinho nods again. Once. Understood. He doesn't say goodbye. He doesn't say, take care of her. He simply turns and walks down the hallway. His steps are quick and precise. He doesn't linger any longer. He carries out his final order. His figure shrinks. Then he turns the corner and disappears from view. Forever. Minho watches him go for a few seconds. Then he turns to the door of the room. He sees through the glass. Naomi sitting, bent over the bed. Her profile in the light of the nightlight seems tired and focused. She doesn't look at him. She is completely absorbed in the child. He pushes the door open and enters. The air in the room smells of medicine and baby cream. He approaches the bed from the other side. He doesn't sit. He stands. He looks at the sleeping Karen, then looks up at Naomi. Their eyes meet across the baby's bed. No words, no expressions, simply the recognition of a new order of things. They are no longer husband and wife. They are two soldiers assigned to guard the same fragile object. Their union is based not on love or trust, but on necessity and duty. It is a cold, silent agreement. Minho finally sits down. He leans back in his chair. Fatigue washes over him like a wave. The battle is over, not in victory, not in defeat, in a truce on very strange terms. His empire's intact. His daughter sleeps. The woman he loved is now just an ally out of necessity. The man he trusted is wiped off the map. He looks at Karen's hand, lying on top of the blanket. He doesn't take it now, he just looks. This is the beginning of something new, very quiet, very fragile, built not on truth and love, but on decision, duty, and one single, true attachment that even DNA testing couldn't sever. He doesn't know what tomorrow will bring, how they will live in the same house, how he will look Naomi in the eyes. But he knows that tomorrow, Karen might open his eyes and smile, and that's worth trying, even if all he has now is this fragility and this long, difficult tomorrow. The hospital became their temporary universe. Days merged into one, measured not by hours, but by IV changes, thermometer readings, and Karen's brief periods of restless sleep. They carried that same ringing silence from the hallway with them into the ward. It hung between them like a thick yet transparent curtain. Minho and Naomi existed in a strange new symbiosis. They barely spoke. Communication was limited to short, necessary phrases, whispered so as not to wake the girl. The temperature has risen to 39. I'll change the compress. The doctor will be here in an hour. The words were dry, devoid of personal pronouns. They sounded like reports from subordinates at a meeting. Minho gave the orders regarding consultations, medications, conditions. Naomi carried them out, overseeing procedures, coaxing Karen to drink the bitter mixture, reading her stories in a quiet, monotone voice. She became the perfect, reliable nurse. She never cried in public, never allowed herself to relax. She functioned. Her love for her daughter now manifested itself only in absolute, almost automatic attentiveness. Minho watched her. He searched for falsehood, theatrics, in her actions, but found none. There was only a tired, focused efficiency. Sometimes, when she thought he wasn't watching, her gaze would linger on Heron's sleeping face, and such deep, bottomless suffering would appear in her eyes that Minho couldn't help but look away. This wasn't an act. This was remorse so complete that it had ceased to be an emotion and had become a part of her being. This, oddly enough, gave him a little confidence. Her guilt was their shared guarantee. She wouldn't run away. She wouldn't harm him. She was bound to this child by the chains of her shame more powerfully than by any of his threats. He barely slept. He sat in the chair, looking at his daughter, and thinking. His thoughts swirled in the same vicious circle. Horin, illness, lies, Jinho. Jinho's name was now like a black hole in his head. He didn't allow himself to dwell on it. He merely acknowledged the fact. He was gone. The connection had been severed. How exactly? Minho didn't care about the details. He gave the order, and the mechanism he and Jinho had once created together worked flawlessly. It was the final proof of their former synergy, and it left a taste of ashes in his mouth. The doctors finally found the cause. Fortunately, it wasn't genetic, but a rare but treatable infection that had eluded them for a long time. They prescribed a new, aggressive treatment. The first 2 days were the worst. Karen was feverish, she was vomiting, and she was weakening visibly. Naomi never left the bed, wiping her forehead, changing her sheets, and holding her during coughing fits. Minho stood by, feeling his helplessness like physical pain. He could buy medicine, but he couldn't make it work any faster. He could hire 10 nurses, but he couldn't replace the soothing murmurs with which Naomi leaned over her daughter. One night, after a particularly difficult procedure, Karen, half delirious, through tears and fever, exhaled. Mom, where's Dad? Naomi froze, then looked up at Minho. For the first time in days, their gazes met in full, conscious contact. Her gaze held a pure, unadulterated question and a transfer of initiative. She didn't move, didn't tell her daughter where he was. She waited. Minho stepped forward from the shadows where he had been standing. He approached the bed from the other side. He carefully took Heron's hot hand. I'm here. Karina, Papa is here. The girl turned her face, wet with tears and sweat, toward him. Her gaze was clouded, but she recognized him. Her fingers squeezed his thumb weakly. Don't go, she whispered. I'm not going anywhere, he said firmly. And at that moment, it wasn't a lie. It was a promise made not to his biological father, not to his wife, but to her, to the one holding his finger. Naomi looked down, continuing to stroke her daughter's hair. No comments, no innuendo, simply working in tandem. In that moment, she and Minho, perhaps for the first time in 7 years, became true allies. Extremely strange allies, scarred by betrayal, but allies in the same cause, to defeat the disease and preserve for the girl a world in which she has a father who loves her. The crisis had passed. The fever began to subside. Karen began to come to her senses. She was still weak and slept a lot, but the light had returned to her eyes, and with her renewed strength, her childlike spontaneity began to return. She didn't understand the tense silence between her parents. She saw them both side by side and accepted it as a given. Mom, Daddy is watching us, she said one day as Naomi spoon-fed her. Naomi shuddered, not raising her head. Minho, standing by the window, felt a shiver run down his spine. He was indeed watching, analyzing, assessing. Daddy's just worried about you, Naomi replied evenly, offering another spoonful. I'm almost healthy, Heron declared, a familiar, capricious note in her voice that made Minho's throat suddenly tighten. This was her, the real her, unchanged. After 2 weeks, the doctors gave her the green light to go home. A strict regimen, medications, but at home. The moment of discharge was strange. The nurses smiled and said, "What a happy family." Minho silently packed his things. Naomi, wrapping Heron in a blanket, caught his gaze and then quickly looked away. They were like two actors who hated each other but were forced to play out the performance to the end for the sake of the one audience member who believed in the fairy tale. The car was waiting at the exit, not his usual chauffeur-driven limo, but a simple, inconspicuous SUV. Minho climbed behind the wheel himself. Naomi settled in the back with Heron in her arms. The girl immediately began to doze off to the gentle rocking motion. They drove in silence. Cityscapes flitted past the window. Minho looked at the road and thought about what awaited them at home. An empty, enormous house. He unlocked the door and let them go first. The house greeted them with a familiar scent, cleanliness, wood, and the light floral scent that always lingered in the hallway. But today, the scent seemed alien, like a museum. Without stopping, Naomi carried Heron upstairs to her room. Minho remained standing downstairs, in the center of the spacious living room. He looked around. There was the sofa where they all watched cartoons together. There was the table where Heron sculpted with Play-Doh. There was the fireplace where they sat on cold evenings. Everything is the same. And everything is completely different. He heard Naomi's quiet footsteps above, a whisper, the creaking of the bed, then footsteps in the hallway. She descended and stopped at the foot of the stairs, hesitating to enter the living room. She waited, like a soldier reporting to the authorities. Minho turned to face her. They stood 10 meters apart, separated by the expanse of a perfectly tidy room and a 7-year gap. Her room is next to yours, he said. Not ours. Yours. You will be caring for her. Doctors will come here. You don't need to go anywhere unless it's necessary. He was setting boundaries. Her territory was the nursery, and perhaps her own bedroom. The rest of the house was his. They would not eat together. They would not spend their evenings together. Their paths would cross only at Karen's bedside. Naomi nodded. I understand. For her, he continued, and for the first time something other than icy calm sounded in his voice. For her, everything should be as before. You are her mother. I am her father, in her presence. This was the most difficult condition, to play not for the world, but for the most important audience, every day, with smiles, with kind words, to create the appearance of normality when everything inside was burned out. Naomi clasped her hands, her face pale but determined. I can do it. He looked at her, and suddenly a thought struck him. How much strength would it take for this woman to do this? More than he, because she would have to perform not only for her daughter, but for him as well, feeling his gaze, his coldness, his knowledge, every second. Her punishment wasn't exile, but this constant, lifelong imprisonment within the lie she'd created. It was a glass cage. Everything was visible. but there was no escape. "Okay," he said, turning to go to his office. He had work to do. The Empire wasn't waiting. "Minho," she said quietly. He stopped but did not turn around. A deep, ragged breath came from behind. "Thank you for letting me be with her." He didn't answer. He simply stood there for a few seconds, then took a step, then another, and disappeared behind the office door, closing it behind him silently, but very tightly. Naomi was left alone in the center of the quiet, vast house. She hugged herself as if freezing. Then she slowly climbed the stairs, entered Karen's sleeping room, sat down on the carpet next to the bed, and pressed her forehead to the edge of the mattress. Her shoulders shook slightly, but there was no sound. None. And in his office, Minho stood by the same window where this story began. The city was ablaze. His empire was intact. His daughter was home. Everything he considered his family had crumbled, but he held on to one, the most important fragment, at the cost of turning his home into a silent, cold war, at the cost of his own heart, which now beat steadily but empty, like a well-oiled machine. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if he and Naomi, two broken people, would be able to build anything beyond this fragile, artificial structure for one child. He didn't know if forgiveness would ever come, or if this feeling would forever remain foreign to him. But he knew that tomorrow morning he would walk into Karen's room, and she would perhaps smile at him and say, "Good morning, Papa." And for the sake of this morning, for the sake of this smile untouched by the truth, he was willing to endure this silence, this cold, this sham life. Because in this sham lay the only real thing, the love of the girl who called him father. And this was a beginning, very quiet, very fragile, but a beginning.